One idea, which is pretty revolutionary and a lot of leaders may find it humbling to follow, is reverse mentoring. This idea that instead of the veterans mentoring the young people, how about the young people mentoring the veterans and helping them to understand certain things that they may not know about? If the younger people in your office, they're digital natives and they understand technology at a level that you don't, could they mentor you on certain technology applications? So what can they teach you that you don't know? And when you get into this reverse mentoring relationship, what happens is the younger generation starts to embrace who you are and feel valuable that they can teach you something. And then what happens in their mind? Maybe you could teach me something too.
Welcome to the How Leaders Think podcast, a show that transforms you by renewing your mind and giving you new ways to think. I'm your host, Kenny Lange, and with me today is the Michael Neuendorff. He is the president of Bay Area Executive Coach, a professional services firm that provides executive and team coaching, team development, offsite facilitation, which is fun, and talent assessments. So he can tell you if you have any talent or maybe you just don't have any. Who's to say? He's also a faculty member of the Center for Executive Coaching, a coach training school, and he's been in the professional development field since 2008. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much, Kenny. I am excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to have this call. I'm always excited to talk to other professionals who do what I do and have the experiences. Some of it is we could commiserate around some of the weird stuff that we may hear in sessions and our clients do, but also love learning from people who got started before I did and have just this wisdom to impact others. And it's one of the reasons why I'm excited to have you on the show. So tell me today, what is on your mind?
Well, what is on my mind is this idea that leaders need to start adapting the way they lead their people. I know your audience already is aware that the era of command and control leadership is over, but they may not be clear what the next era is. And I believe it's leader as coach.
Leader as coach. And maybe just because of my profession, I've read some books or heard some things about that. But I'd love for you to create a distinction, and it's maybe one that I picked up from Michael Bungay Stanier, who wrote The Coaching Habit, and he has several other great books. I love his style. But what does it mean to be leader as coach? And then if you read some of Michael's works, he may talk about, well, I don't need you to be a coach, but maybe more coach-like. And how do you see that dynamic?
I think that's a really good distinction. The other book that Stanier has written, Bungay Stanier has written, that I think is important for leaders is The Advice Trap. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I find a lot of leaders get themselves into by rising up to a level of leadership because they're so smart, they're so capable of making decisions, sizing up the situation quickly, and then telling the people around them what to do. And that's great, but that stops with you. How do you then equip the next generation of leaders if you are constantly in the advice trap? So we don't need leaders to be coaches like us and be able to carry an entire coaching session of 50 minutes. That's not what I'm suggesting. It's for leaders to understand that there's a different style of leadership than what got you to where you are. And that may be the way to help your followers get to where you are, which is the next level.
Right. I think that those are important realizations. I think they're difficult realizations. One of my coaches, Scott Ritzheimer, who's been a guest numerous times and runs Scale Architects, he's in the process of refining his book, The Founder's Evolution, which hopefully at some point, I think later this year or beginning of next year, will be fully published. But he uses a sports metaphor of going from like the all-star on the field to maybe the team captain, and then suddenly you're the coach on the sidelines. And if we were to say, watch, as of this recording, the NBA finals are about to kick off, and it would be absurd for us to see one of the coaches of these teams step onto the court, catch a pass, and try to sink a three-pointer. But I think that's where a lot of executives, leaders, people who have ascended to these great places because of their expertise, their smarts, they've been able to get to places because they can sink that game-winning three. They can make that final pass that's really important or block a shot. But it's like, it can feel like overnight, all the things that got you here aren't nearly as valuable, and people don't want you to use those things anymore to move forward. Talk a little bit about that transition, because I see that as such a shock to the system. I know it's when times and moments when I've gone through that, it's been difficult for me because I derive my value from what I could individually contribute. And now suddenly I'm being judged by a totally different set of criteria.
So in my introduction, you shared that I teach people how to coach. And I've had a lot of people come through the program, Kenny, who are leaders, and their background is in executive leadership. There is this misnomer in the world of executive coaching that you need to have been an executive to coach executives. Well, if you really understand coaching, you know that it's not mentoring, it's not consulting, it's not training. So truly, you don't need to have been an executive to coach executives, but I understand why people have that thought. The reason that I give that context is because these people who have been former executives who were rewarded for their ability to make decisions quickly and tell people what to do find it incredibly difficult to turn that off. It is so hard to stop telling people what to do if that is what has gotten you to where you are, and it's one of your signature talents and skills. So I find that leaders actually need to unlearn before they can learn. And that's a multi-step process that leaders find quite difficult and not what they anticipated.
Right. What does that look like inside of a company? Someone's climbing the ladder, the corporate ladder, and they're progressing, they're doing well, they're crushing their goals and all these things. It's not as though the company can stop operating so that they could learn these new skills that they're going to need in order to move from star performer to executive leader, manager of people. What needs to happen so that they can start to develop those things while still continuing to work, still knowing that the marketplace is evolving, still knowing that technology is currently rapidly changing what the landscape and future of work look like. Well, that demand could almost seem unrealistic or insurmountable for a lot of leaders who are making that transition today.
What comes to mind for me is this idea of the need for speed, that as rapidly as the world is changing, leaders feel that they need to be quick and they need to be able to be agile and move quickly. And coaching seems to slow down the whole process. So why would I want to slow down the pace of leadership to have a coaching style conversation with one of my directs or my team? Well, my answer to that is that if you do have these from time to time, not every conversation, because that would probably tire the people who are following you, because sometimes they actually want you to tell them what to do. It's not appropriate in every conversation. So the one idea that you can implement right away, and this is going to ring true with every executive anyway, is don't come to me with your problems without answers and solutions that you already have thought of. I've talked with so many leaders who wish their people would do that and are missing that link between being a coaching style leader and enabling that in their people.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the 1-3-1 method. It's like, can we boil it down into a single sentence? Like, what's the problem you're facing? You could get all like Toyota and Lean, where they would say, like, if you can't define a process in a single page, you don't understand it well enough. I would almost say the same thing about a problem. If you couldn't boil it down into a single question, then or statement, then you may not understand the problem well enough to devise solutions. But one problem statement, 3 potential solutions, and the one that you like, not the one that you're going full speed ahead on. But I've tried to coach the executives I work with to help their teammates understand that. And even for them, sometimes just being able to formulate that as they bring something to their team. I think that there are these little tools and these tricks that help. I love what you said about like slowing down time in these little compressed areas. It's sort of a slow down to speed up almost. Again, I love quoting things and then forgetting where I learned them, but I do believe it came from one of the sniper schools in the US military, which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think in a society, an economy that values speed, and certainly I have nothing against speed. I love going what a friend of mine would call mock Jesus with your hair on fire. Like I love moving at that pace, but I realized the benefit of having some key moments or places where I do slow down so that it can be more smooth. Because at the end of the day, especially as for executives and those who want to be executives, like you're held accountable for what multiple people are doing. Like the results you drive are not necessarily those that you can totally control. And so you can't force your way into better results when you're leading a team of people. So how do you help executives and those that maybe are fresh into executive leadership start to make that mindset shift? Because I think would you agree that their mindset has to shift before their behaviors fully can?
Oh, absolutely. There is this concept in coaching called perceptual coaching, right? That we are seeking to change perception, but we can't do that from the outside. That has to happen from
Mhm.
the inside. Your perception has to change. And so your self perception as to what's necessary now as the leader that you are must change. So
Mm.
that has to happen. As you're saying, the mindset has to shift first. So you may want to move away from thinking that I have to do everything myself. Everything has to move at 90 miles an hour. I have to continue to tell people what to do because they're not nearly as good as me. And if I wait for them to figure it out, we're going to slow down. These are all perceptions that probably have to shift. And another one,
Yeah.
which is a painful one, is the addiction of being right. That there are some leaders that are getting in their own way in terms of developing teamwork and true bonds with the people that they work with by being addicted to being right. And that's a perception that's really hard to break.
That's really interesting. So, can you say more about what does it mean to be addicted to being right?
So, one person that I worked with a few years ago, whose name will not be revealed, had a 360. And in the 360, which is just in case people aren't sure, 360 being a survey that is conducted generally in an online instrument of people who work with and around the person who's being coached or rated. So the ratings came back, and numerous people said in the anonymous comments that I don't really like to debate with you because you always have to have the last word. And I feel
Wow.
like you're always kind of talking me into a corner where I just I can't debate anymore. You have to prove that your point is right. And that's an example of being addicted to being right, where even minor disagreements, you've got to win. You've got to win every time
Ah,
and prove how smart and capable you are. And you don't even realize it until you see it in these anonymous comments. And then you reflect on it and you debrief it with the coach and you realize, I didn't even know I had this addiction. But people are telling me that they don't even want to have
right.
debates with me. What does that say about your leadership and the ability to get the best ideas out on the table?
Right, because then it's become a competition instead of a pursuit of the truth. Or I was talking with my business partner about a client and someone that he was coaching, and it just came down to a thinking that everything is a zero sum game, that we can't both be right or both be wrong. It has to be all one and not the other. And what kind of harm that was actually producing inside of the organization. And I think it's almost you can call it a scarcity mindset. It could be a survivalist mindset. I do think that there's a lot of cultures out there that advocate for a survival of the fittest, right? Like if I'm getting the promotion and doing well enough to get it, then that means everybody else was god awful terrible, or I was just that much better, which I think creates a lot of false dichotomies.
Mhm.
So when you're coaching people and just the patterns you've recognized in leaders who are having to change that mindset, I don't think anybody listened to you say that, well, we've got to listen to other people. We've got to do this. Like there's tons of books, podcasts, gurus, and well-meaning people out there who would say these things. And I think mentally, a lot of these leaders connect or assent to like, yeah, that sounds good. But then the behaviors don't reflect that. So what are the challenges that leaders are really up against? And it sounds like they're internal in changing their mindset, not just consuming more of or the right information. Like you could go and read Michael's books about the advice trap and the coaching habit and all those different things, and plenty from others. But it doesn't mean that fundamentally anything's going to change about the way in which you lead. So, what are people actually trying to overcome in that mindset transition?
Well, first thing is inertia, right? That we usually don't like change. And it's much easier to just keep going the way we're going. And
Mhm.
unless there is some sort of pain that is no longer manageable or gain that is so exciting that we would do anything to have it, then there generally isn't enough motivation to change. So, one of the reasons that we do 360s is because there is often pain in reading some of those comments that are revealing blind spots that you have. There was an executive coach recently who did an analysis of leaders to discover what number of blind spots they might have. And what they found was on average, there are 3.6 blind spots that most leaders have. And that's
Mm.
painful to realize that. Like, we might think we have a blind spot, but
Right.
really?
One feels too many. One
Right.
is one too
Yeah.
many.
Yeah. As good as I am, maybe I have one. But to have three or four is painful. It's painful to realize that we're missing that level of self-awareness. So there's pain associated in being reminded that our self-awareness has limitations. And that is often motivation. That's a window of opportunity, Kenny, when the leader can have this shift and then push into that. Or
Mhm.
I had a client who had the opportunity to move up to the next level of leadership. He was in a sales role and he was moving too fast. I mean, earlier we talked about the need for
Mm.
speed. Well, he was moving too fast, and his boss told him, unless you slow down, you're not going to move up to the next level. Like, you are moving too fast,
Whoa.
you're micromanaging, you're taking every deal that comes across your desk without even sizing it up and determining if it's right for the organization or not. It was burning out internal teams who were trying to meet these owners'
Yeah.
demands. And so he had pain associated with people internally not approving of the way he was operating. And the gain was, I want to get that next level of promotion, but I have to change. If I don't change, my boss is telling me I'm not going to get it. So there we had both.
Yeah. A little bit of a carrot and stick. And yeah, I found myself recently talking with an executive about a member of their team, and they're like, "Man, it's like I've tried to tell them like this and this will happen, and sometimes you do need both to trigger a big enough change." And I said, "Well, I think you're laying out a good carrot, an incentive, a benefit to these things." I said, but we have to remember that when given an option of like gaining $100 or not losing $100, people would rather not lose $100 than get $100 handed to them, right? I said, we have to be cognitive of that, and we don't have to agree with it, but we can't ignore that aspect of human motivation. Now, does that mean that we need to induce fear into everybody? No, absolutely not. But you could also frame up like what's at stake in a way that is, I still think, caring, compassionate, empathetic, to say, you are in coaching someone, you are working against yourself. You've said, absent of anything else, that you want these sort of things. These are your goals, your career ambitions, personal, whatever you want, the lifestyle you want. Do you realize that by continuing this way, you will stay where you are? You might even go backwards. And so it's not a let me threaten you with anything. It's let me lay out the natural consequences of these actions and where they're going to lead you. And if they aren't leading you where you want to go, well, the only alternative is to change, right? Because even as I think, especially as outside coaches, as you and I are, we can't force anybody to do anything,
Right.
right? We can merely lay out the field, the map for them to say, you are entitled to your own choices. You have free will. You have freedoms granted to you by the country you live in and all these different things. So you are more than welcome to continue down this path, but let's not kid ourselves into where this leads. And if this isn't where you want to go, then you have to change. And I think that's a really sobering moment for a lot of leaders who have maybe over-invested in doing things a certain way. I might talk about them as holding something with a closed hand versus an open hand. And I'm curious, what do you run into when someone has taken their performance and instead of that's a thing they do, but they've made it who they are? They've actually integrated a way of doing things into their identity, as opposed to, I have these goals, therefore I do these things.
It's interesting that people take on a work persona that may be quite different than their persona in their personal life. I
Hmm.
remember working with one leader he was in a professional services firm, and he was also the type of leader who was putting customers first and colleagues second. And he was finding it difficult to staff his teams because in a professional services firm, you bring people together, work on a team, a project for a client. And then after that project is done, the team disperses and then they come back together for the next team or project. And he was getting a lot of negative blowback about his style of leadership. And as we discussed why he's this way, he realized I'm a different person when I walk through the doors of the office because out in my personal life, I'm actually a pretty good guy. Like people like me. I'm more emotionally intelligent and I care about people more in terms of the way I
Hmm.
show it. But at work, I get so driven by the need to succeed for the client that I forget about the needs of the people that I work with, and I'm having trouble balancing the two. So help me figure this out. And what we
Wow.
decided was we came up with something that was so simple, Kenny. It was just a mantra, which was that little bit extra. And that little bit extra was
Hmm.
give the people you work with that little bit extra time, care, attention, mentorship, support, whatever it is for each individual, give them a little bit extra than what you have been doing. And it's going to start having this cumulative positive effect on your reputation. And people will start to see you as a different leader. And you're going to start finding that balance between who you are outside and who you are inside, which was
Wow.
actually really rewarding to not have to be different, right? Because we just want to be ourselves. And he then realized, oh, I could do that and actually succeed at a higher level.
What was the impact both inside the workplace, but I'm also curious of the impact on him as a whole person, even outside, in making those changes?
Well, greater personal satisfaction that people are starting to like me more. I mean, you've probably heard leaders say, I don't need to be liked. I need to be respected. I'm not here to make friends. And
Right, right.
yeah, that sounds maybe like some cool, lofty way of thinking about leadership. But inside, we actually do like to be liked.
Yeah.
Or said another way, we don't like being disliked. And
We don't want to lose our $100.
yeah, we don't like being disliked. Maybe that's more painful. So he was able to feel better about himself And then when he started giving that a little bit extra to certain people, and in one case, it was mentoring to help someone get to partner, because in this professional services
Wow.
firm,
Yeah.
that's the highest level you want to get to is partner. And he mentored this person by helping lay out to them how to get to partner and in providing some opportunities to get the challenging work that would show that they were eligible.
Yeah.
And that felt good because they hadn't done that for some time, pouring themselves into the development of another
Wow.
because they were so driven to serve the client. But it's not a zero-sum game, Kenny. It's not either you serve the client or you serve your colleagues and support them. There is that way to have both. And this is something wonderful about coaching is we take away the either or and help our client to understand, and how could you have both?
Yeah. I had a pastor remind me frequently when I was younger. It's like there's so many more things that are a both and situation, not an either or, like you're trying to make it. And I think you would be better off if you would interpret more situations that way, which I believe I was like, he doesn't understand. Like, I either got to get or I'm getting got and all this other stuff. And then, much like I tell people, my dad got so much smarter the older I get. I don't know if he just like he was reading more as I went to college.
I love that joke.
But yeah, but that pastor's wisdom gets better and better every year. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, okay, so he was right. He wasn't right at the time. It just whatever it was. One thing I would love to hear you talk about, since you brought up that book, and I do think that it's one of the biggest identity shifts and behavioral shifts that high level leaders, executive leaders need to make, is taming the advice monster, avoiding that advice trap. And if you could talk a little bit about what that is and how that impacts leadership in terms of like what we've been discussing so far.
Well, let's talk about something that companies dearly want, which is a strong pipeline. They need to know that as our leaders age out, that the next generation of leaders is ready to go. And this is a challenge. This is a challenge in today's environment. You may have heard that there are a lot of young people today, people in their 20s and 30s, who don't want to lead. They don't want to manage. And I think part of that is driven by seeing how stressed, unhappy, and overworked their leaders are. Why would they want that? And this other element that I think is pertinent to what you're asking me is they're not being seen as whole people and respected for what they know and what they can contribute. They're just told what to do all the time and being
Mhm.
given lots of advice about how they should dress and what their office etiquette should be and how they should show up. And at some point, they just say, okay, well, I guess you don't understand who I am. So if you don't understand who I am, then I don't necessarily want to be like you. So there is this big gap, this big knowledge gap between what does it really mean to lead for today's younger generations. And I believe that by taming that advice monster and just stop believing that you know everything about how the next generation can succeed in today's world. And
Mhm.
without your advice, they're just never going to make it. That's a myth. Some people do need a lot of advice. There's no doubt about it. But other people, you got to give them a chance. Give them a chance. And by just holding back and giving advice when it's asked of, and other times helping them get to the solution in any other
Mhm.
number of ways, is going to really start to fill that succession pipeline and make people excited about the next level of leadership.
Right. Absolutely. Now, one thing I'm not hearing you say, because I would agree with what you're advocating for, is we got to listen. Like, let's not be, our first reaction shouldn't be, well, let me tell you how to do things, right? Even though no one asked me. I'm also not hearing you say, take everything the next generation, the younger generation says, and absolutely go, oh, yeah, that's absolutely the right way to do everything, right? Because there has to be this benefit of like, I'm listening to you and you have a perspective that's valuable, but I also sit in a place of authority that would allow me to change things based on what you're telling me, but I also have responsibilities you may not be fully aware of. I may have a perspective across divisions, departments, the company, but also I may have the benefit of some life experience you just haven't accumulated yet. And so, again, I think it can come back to, it can feel like a zero sum game of either it's all on, I've gone before, I'm older, wiser, more knowledgeable, better perspective, more responsible, all these things. Therefore, I have all the answers. Or people swing into the other direction, fall in the other ditch of, well, all the young people, all the newer workers, they have all the answers. And I have to reject both. But I think it's hard to have a conversation about where is the balance in that, because you've got people who need to be heard by people who need to listen, but people who have to make decisions that the people who want to be heard may not fully grasp. How do we start to bridge that gap? And I have to imagine a lot of that onus is on those who are in those positions of leadership, regardless of age or tenure.
One idea, which I think is pretty revolutionary and a lot of leaders may find it humbling to follow, is reverse mentoring. This idea that instead of the veterans mentoring the young people, how about the young people mentoring the veterans and helping them to understand certain things that they may not know about? For example, if the younger people in your office, they're digital natives and they understand technology at a level that you don't, could they mentor you on certain technology applications? So what can they teach you that you don't know? And when you get into this reverse mentoring relationship, what happens is the younger generation starts to embrace who you are and feel valuable that they can teach you something. And then what happens in their mind? Maybe you could teach me something too. Maybe I would be open to hearing something from you.
Right.
If you're open to learning from me, well, we have this natural law of reciprocity where we now are willing to be open to learning something from you. So rather than that,
Yeah.
that either you know everything and I know nothing, why don't we actually create this idea where we both know things that each other doesn't, and we're willing to trust and respect each other so that we can learn from each other, and it creates a new kind of partnership.
I really like that. And I love how you described mentoring can be on, not in general. I think people utilize the term mentoring oftentimes maybe too broadly. I'm, to be honest, I'm a fan and a beneficiary of mentoring,
Mhm.
but I think being mentored on something specific like a technology platform or certain ways of doing things or in very discrete areas, I think could be a helpful mind shift for those who are in leadership, maybe more so for those who have been in leadership a little while, to go, I'm not saying I know nothing. I have some hard won wisdom. I actually have accolades or results to back up my reason for seeing the world in the way that I do. It's not a hunch. But you may say, but I don't have those things, those credentials, or as the kids might say, the receipts in in this one area. And so I am going to find someone who's more knowledgeable to mentor me on that. I also think it's harder because we've come out of generations of places where that command and control was, you wanted to climb up, be at the top, that empowered you with certain privileges and things of that nature. And instead, now it feels like, well, I made it to the top. I earned my way. Therefore, people should respect me. But you're telling me I've got to earn the respect of people far more junior, less tenured, less experienced than me. And that feels like a world upside down for the way that we've been doing things.
And isn't that so interesting? This idea of earning the respect of people several levels down below, that I think if you have that level of humility, you're so on the right track. That I don't
Hmm.
deserve their respect. They must respect me, but I need to earn their respect and their trust.
Yeah. It makes me think that there's, not that I think John Maxwell is off his rocker on anything in particular, but there's a lot of definitions of leadership out there. His is
Mhm.
one that's short enough for me to remember. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. But I do think that the currency of influence has changed in the way in which if it is a currency and we think about it like a currency, like a US dollar or something like that, dollars are earned, right? I do work and create value in exchange for value in the form of currency. Is if influence is a currency, then influence almost by definition would have to be earned. It's not automatically granted.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am an executive and what I'm really looking for is influence so that I can direct things and take all my experience, my skill set, my wisdom, my authority, power, whatever that may be, and leverage it to good use, I will still have to earn the influence it would take to activate all of those things. Otherwise, it just sits bundled up. You might as well put it in a 50-gallon drum and roll it off to the side because it won't matter. And I think that's a sobering reality. And I'll say this for myself, that has been a hard part of my own leadership, is because I've felt the scrappiness of trying to like prove myself and be an entrepreneur and make this money and do these things. And I think the most humbling has been being a dad and having kids that when I can go out in the world, it was almost felt like there was a reverse of your executive you're describing. Is I could go out in the world and people said, "Oh yeah, you've done this and you've helped this and done this," and then I come home and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not going to listen to you. Like I got 5 kids and 4 teenagers, so
Right.
I need a lot of prayer." And they're good kids. I pick on them, but they did get some personality traits, honestly. And but that has been a really hard part, is where I still feel like it's like, look, half your DNA is mine. Like, and I'm putting a roof over your head. Like, at what point have I earned the ability to do this? But at the same time, I've seen the greatest progress in certain areas is when I slowed down and I took the time to listen to especially one of my teenagers, so that we could have a conversation that was really important. Because for me, the stakes of parenting are crazy high,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the impact of those conversations, even if they seem minuscule or harmless or fast or quick, whatever, are very high. And so that has taught me a lot about how I interact and outside of the home in work situations about, oh, okay. So even with the people who maybe have the most reason to just automatically by default give me their ear because of the power dynamics between us, to where I'm putting a roof over their head and food on the table and clothes on their back and all these different things, I'm still having to earn my voice and my influence with them. Why should that be any different out in the rest of the world? And it really has slowed me down. And much to my surprise, I haven't died by slowing down. But because I have literally told people, it's like, I think if I slow down, if I start doing less, if I stop proving and achieving, it will feel like a sort of death to me. And as I've exercised, and I still suck at it, but as I've been doing that, especially over the last, I would say 6 to 12 months, I've been really pleasantly surprised that the world has not come to an end.
I remember hearing this story about Warren Buffett talking with a pilot of a plane and asking him, like, what are the things that you want to achieve? And he listed out like 10 or 20 different things. And Warren said, well, you can't achieve all that. It's not possible. And he really wanted him to get it down to like 3 things that then you might actually be able to attain greatness in those 3 areas and get them done. And he knows as much about success in life as anyone. If his wisdom is less is more, and yet we live in this world that always tells us that more is more, who's right? Who's right?
Right? Yeah. If the masses' knowledge was the key to success, we'd all be billionaires with 6-pack abs, right?
Right. Well, speak for yourself, Kenny. I am a billionaire with 6-pack.
You're right. My mistake. Please. Well, I'll schedule a session with you shortly.
I miss putting that in my
Well,
bio.
we should add that in. We'll fix it in post. Michael, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I think we could have probably 47 more and they'd all be great topics. But if someone is listening, they're saying, you know what, I'm in that transition, or maybe I've transitioned into that place and it's just not gone the way I had thought, but maybe this conversation unlocks some things. What's a baby step a listener could take in the next 24 hours, spending little to no money, to start to make progress towards becoming this sort of leader that has a different mindset, has really started to see things more about winning through others as opposed to achieving for themselves?
One step that doesn't have to cost any money at all, and you could achieve it in 24 hours, would be to ask 5 people who work with you. And if you're in a small business, you don't even have 5 people, and ask customers, ask partners. 5 people. I know I have some blind spots in my self-awareness. What do you think is one blind spot I have about the way I lead? If you ask 5 people, and especially if they're across different generations, even better, then within 24 hours, you're going to have a bit of an awakening that is going to help you to then create a pathway towards a more beneficial style of leadership that you can decide to apply.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like a terrifyingly good question.
Right.
And those are the best kind. Honestly, I've come across a few questions like that. And anytime I've ever asked those or endeavored to take those sort of actions, because they're not ones that you do every month or anything like that, but just certain moments, and the answers sting at first, but then you start to realize that anybody who cares enough about you and wants to see you succeed will answer it honestly, and really they've given you a gift.
Truly.
Michael, if people want to know more about you and more about your work, where should they connect with you? Where should they find you? And maybe if they have some follow-up questions from today's episode, could reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kenny. A few ways to reach out to me. One is just directly by email. If you want to email me at michael@bayareaexecutivecoach.com, I'm very responsive. I stay on top of my inbox. I believe that that's one of the ways that I've been able to be successful in business, is to manage my email well. And then you could visit my website, bayareaexecutivecoach.com. If you want to learn more about being a leader as coach, you may want to visit my second website, bayareaexecutivecoachtraining.com, which is the website dedicated to people who are new or aspiring executive coaches. And you may not even want to enter the profession of executive coaching, but you would just like to learn, how do I adopt a coaching style of leadership, as Kenny and I were talking about in this conversation. In July, I will be leading a seminar on the campus of the University of Kansas. This is in the 3rd week of July, where we're going to have a 4-day seminar that is going to have a special focus on internal coaching, which is coaching as a leader, coaching inside an organization, not as a profession, not for external reward, but for internal fulfillment inside your organization to develop that next level of leadership. If you'd like to learn more about that, visit the Center for Executive Coaching, and you'll see right on the homepage the seminar we're going to do with Kansas University, and you'll be able to get a dual certificate from the University of Kansas and from the Center for Executive Coaching. So you get a 2-for-1 that you could put on your LinkedIn profile. And speaking of LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn as Michael Neuendorff, or follow my company page at Bayer Executive Coach. So I think I've covered it all.
Excellent. I think you have. And we will make sure that all of those are linked in the show notes and on the YouTube description. So if you're interested in that, when you're done with the episode, just drop in, click the link, go visit, sign up. As you can tell, Michael is a wealth of knowledge. So you do well to follow him on LinkedIn at a very minimum, but please go and check out his other materials. Michael, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and having this conversation. I feel better for it. This has helped me process through some things. So thanks for the free session. And thank you, listeners. You spent some time with me and Michael. We understand you have many choices when listening to podcasts, and we thank you for flying Michael and Kenny. But we hope that you got a lot out of this, that you have some things that you can go and apply immediately. If you did get value, or anything out of this episode or any of the other ones, please like, rate, review, subscribe, whatever the button of action is on your platform of choice. I would greatly appreciate it, not just because I want to grow subscriber counts or anything like that. I certainly do, because I believe that this is valuable, but I also know that this gets these sort of conversations in front of more people just like yourselves who are looking for this kind of content to take their next step in leadership. And so that's a free and easy way that you can also pay it forward. And won't that make you feel warm and fuzzy inside? Until next time, change the way you think, you'll change the way you lead. We'll see you.